Hello, and thank you for accessing our mini session, Top 5 Insights to Quantify T&E Program Value for Your Organization in 15 Minutes. This training is part of our Timely Topics Education Series, which includes education and resources designed to speak to the current business environment. I'm your host, Naomi, and I'll be going over a few quick items before we get started. Everything you see on your screen is movable and resizable using the arrows in the corners. At the bottom of your screen are multiple widgets to support today's session, and I'll highlight a couple right now. If you have any questions about today's content, you can submit them through the Q&A widget, and we'll be sure to get back to you via email. And finally, to help guide us on future topics, we ask that you complete a quick survey at the close of the session. You can find it in the widget that looks like a clipboard. Now that that's out of the way, I'd like to hand it off to our speaker for today's mini session, Bill Becker.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks for the time today, and really look forward to having this conversation on the top 5 insights to quantify your T&E program value. Big part of what I like to do is really to put a financial value on things, and it's kind of difficult, but we're going to walk through a methodology that I'm super comfortable with, and I think it'll help you as well. If you're joining me for the first time, you may have missed my first session where I talked about what we call value pillars here at SAP Concur. These are the 4 areas where our program is really meant to have an impact on the business outcomes that you desire. So we're going to talk about them real briefly, and then we're going to get into that application, which is a key part of the conversation today. We talk about pillar number 1 is spend governance, the who, what, when, where, why, and how money is spent. And do I have the full visibility into that to make the best spend decisions possible? Number 2, controls and compliance. Once I see what's happening, do I have controls in place to avoid and catch non-compliant spend, which is errors and bad behavior? Number 3, the employee experience. Am I doing everything as efficiently and effectively as possible? Finally is expansion and optimization, which is, am I doing this globally? Am I accounting for all the challenges that we face in different regions? And the 5th insight from last week was this issue of balance, that we have to balance these pillars and optimize our program based on our specific needs and the specific challenges that we face. So that's a high-level outline of the updates, of the insights from last time. Now let's look individually at these, and let's think through and talk through why these matter. And that this is the why. This is the so what of the value pillars. When we look at spend governance and we understand the complexity of our spend, we've got numerous people spending money, some of them through expense reports, some of them through the P card, some of them through invoice process. There's a lot of purchasing going on in a decentralized purchasing arena, which many of us are in right now. So how do we see and know and understand exactly what's going on within that spend arena? Here's the question I have. Does having more data on your spend impact your ability to spend that money more wisely? I think everyone on the call can answer yes, it does, or yes, this makes sense, yes, this is reasonable. Because when we look at every business decision we make, when we look at our personal decisions, the more information we have, the more likely we are to make better decisions. And that's what SAP Concur is here to do. That's the essence of spend governance. So we take a look at that miscellaneous spend bucket with no receipt required. And we ask ourselves, can we spend that money more wisely? And the answer is, we don't know, because we don't know what that spend is. It's miscellaneous. We don't know what category it's in. There's no receipt, so we don't know when it happened. We don't know what the vendor name is. We really don't know anything about it. So it comes to the fact of looking at if we can do things to make that spend more visible. And there's a number of ways we can do that within SAP Concur, and we're not going to get into the specifics. That's for a later call. But if we can see better what's going on, if we can look at that parking tab and understand, well, if this is actually parking at ABC Hotel, well, if we have free negotiated parking at that hotel chain, guess what? That spend visibility is going to help us spend that money more wisely. And that's really the essence of what we're talking about. So the question becomes this: is it reasonable to think that you can spend that money 2% more wisely? Can you reduce your spend by 2% by having better information to make better decisions? The word reasonable is key here, because as we've just acknowledged, if you don't know what's happening in that spend bucket, you don't know how inefficient or how ineffective that is. So it really comes down to thinking through this and saying, do I accept the first premise that I can spend the money more wisely if I have better information? I think most would argue that the answer to that is yes. Is 2% reasonable? I think 2% is low, and it's intentionally low, and here's why. I talk to people all over the country from multiple sizes of organizations, and I've had people tell me time and time again, I can cut 5% out of a budget, nobody's going to know it. 5% is not a lot. 2% is not a lot. 2% means you find a few things, a few decent-sized items that can have a big impact on your overall spend. The focus I have here is not on, does 2% seem reasonable, or should it be 1% or 1.5% or 2.25%? That misses the point. The point is we need to understand, and we need to put a value, whatever value you think that is or should be, as you look at improvements of your program. And again, we're going to talk about some specific ones in the next meetings here. But let's put a value on spend visibility and spend governance, because if we see more, we know more, we can do better. Key component of it, again, let's not focus on the number, let's focus on the concept. Controls and compliance. Again, a really big, broad, deep, challenging area when we look at everything that's involved with our travel and expense program, including P-cards and invoice, if that's part of your spend platform. A lot of challenges, a lot going on. And again, when we understand that the goal of controls and compliance is to lower non-compliant spend, and we understand that non-compliant spend includes errors, mistakes, it becomes a much bigger category than we would probably think if we're not really wrapping our arms around this. Here's my question. Here's the first of two questions. Does having best-in-class internal controls impact your ability to reduce errors and bad behavior? Again, the core of internal controls is to discourage and catch bad behavior and mistakes and non-compliant spend. And when we look at our program and we look at the controls in place, I think everyone on the call would agree that as we tighten up controls, as we put more controls into more parts of our business, it's pretty undeniable that that's going to have a positive impact. Okay, so then I'm going to pose the question to you this time. Is it reasonable to believe that you could save 3% by reducing errors and bad behavior? The answer to this is the same as we answer to the spend visibility. We don't know. Because again, when we're going to be honest with ourselves and look at our programs, we're going to acknowledge we don't know how much bad behavior is happening. We don't know how many mistakes are happening. And there's a lot of statistics, a lot of the ways that we can look at the program and we can put a value on it. Most common terms that I hear is that between 2 and 5% of your spend is out of compliance. And I've done a webinar where about 600 people on the webinar, I asked the question, how much do you think you have? And the largest response we got was people think that they actually had more than 5%. So it's material. It's significant. And is it reasonable to think that you can catch and stop half of it if you have best-in-class internal controls in place? You know what I think? I think that's an easy argument to make. And that's, again, why we do this and why we put a financial value on it, because we need to address it even if we don't know exactly what it is. If we don't know exactly what the number is, we can either come up with a reasonable estimate, or we can throw up our hands and just say, since I can't quantify this perfectly, we're going to move on. But then you don't even consider it. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people, that's a roadblock to improving your program, is if you say, since I can't nail this down perfectly, I'm not going to address it. Okay? Final pillar here that we're going to talk about today is the employee experience. And there's two things. When I look at quantifying the employee experience, I look at it two ways. I look at it from a productivity standpoint, which we're going to quantify. We're going to put a number on that today. But I also look at the employee satisfaction. Really hard to put a number on that. What is the cost to replace an unhappy employee who left due to a very cumbersome process? We can't afford to do that. That's very painful and very challenging. What we can look at, however, is this. Does the combination of travel and expense on one platform, okay, just the very core principle of who we are as an organization, meaning SAP Concur, does having one platform that includes travel and expense, does that save time? Again, we can start looking at all of the examples here. I could talk through about a dozen things, but we're not going to do that because we're going to look at this more specifically down the road. But all of the validation that happens, just think on the back office when you've got a receipt, an itinerary, and a card feed all coming together into a line item for validation. Just think of the time savings that that has for the person who's validating that spend. And on the front end, from a traveler's perspective, the list is very, very long of improvements and enhancements and time savings. So again, we put out there is a reasonable number. If you've done a full-time survey in the entire process, which most of us have not, you could probably come up with an exact number. Short of that, with our goal being materiality here, is it reasonable to think that you can reduce your time spent by 10%, 1 minute out of 10? And I think, again, if we really think through our processes, we could probably laugh right now and say 10% is low. There's so much opportunity for improvement that I think the answer to that is yes. So we go through this analysis. We're going to do it looking at specific metrics in future calls, and we come up with some numbers. What does that mean? It's really important to address this return on investment, ROI, which is what a lot of clients are asking for and looking for, versus the value of improvement. I talk about the value improvement, and here's why. Here's what we know for a fact. There's a lot of unknowns, right? We know for a fact there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of variables. And I could list 50 right now of things that we just don't know for sure, that we can't quantify exactly, or all these variables that impact our spend. So it really, and again, getting back to the main unknown, which is we don't even know how much non-compliant spend we have. So it's a challenge, and it's hard, right? I focus on value, not on savings. I focus on the value of improvement. For me, value is this. It's cost reduction, cost avoidance, efficiency improvements. Okay, it's not just hard dollar savings, because that's very specific. Again, with all the variables and unknowns, do we know that our spend go down because our situation changed? Or is something that we didn't know was happening, fraudulent behavior, for instance, just stopping? We don't know. Okay? So I look big picture at value, and the goal of doing this is this. It's materiality. It's materiality of improvement, not exactness, because we can't do exactness. It's materiality. My number one goal is to get you to focus on all aspects. By all aspects, I mean the value pillars of spend governance, controls and compliance, employee experience, and expansion and optimization. Put a value on those. Consider them in everything you do, because when you do, you will see the materiality of what's going on. We're going to close with this. When we do put a value on things, on these pillars, I use 2%, 3%, 10%. It doesn't matter to me if you want to use 1%, 1%, 1%. Whatever the numbers are, the goal here is to focus on all of those, understanding that those all feed into expansion and optimization, because when you improve your controls and compliance in the region where you exist currently, and you then expand into a new geography, you're getting that value again. So it does become a cumulative impact of doing these. So again, the number itself isn't important. What's important is that we consider that in our conversations. When I do it, and when we apply these specific parts of your business, we're going to look at what best-in-class looks like. What is best-in-class behavior and best-in-class tools to impact these value pillars? What does average look like? And what does a disparate system look like? And I do this to show Concur clients you have a tremendous value compared to having an unconnected travel and expense system. And then we look to what improvement looks like. Here are some numbers to consider, and I'm going to close with this. When I do these exercises, when I apply these globally to different sizes of organizations, these are the numbers that I see. This is the value that I see. This is the costs, quote unquote, the savings, the value versus the spend within an organization. It's significant. And I look at best in class, and I'm comfortable, based on this analysis, to look a client in the eye and say, if you have $20 million in spend, you're going to spend $2 million less. Your value will improve by 10% or $2 million. And that's how we look at the specific areas of business and determine where we may want to address those down the road. I do look forward to applying these specifically on future calls. Hope this was helpful. And with this, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Naomi.
Thank you so much, Bill. If you would like to check out additional resources available within the Timely Topics Education series, please be sure to click through the link that could be found in the Resources widget. And as a final reminder, please be sure to complete the survey before you go. Thanks so much for joining us.